Hey up everybody and welcome back. Right, well today is sort of going to be the first day of work on the new project. You've seen the plan. I've got to put the heating on in a minute because it's a little, it's only about 50 degrees in here and I can't work in the cold. Don't know how you do it, shed built Dave. I can't work in the cold. Alright, so don't have anything to tell you. We're well over 4,060 something subscribers, so again thank you. That's really good, makes it all worthwhile. And what else? Oh, I noticed I was scratching myself a lot in the last video, so I've done my beard. Right, gonna put this in the trials frame jig and then we'll start doing some cutting. I think what I'm going to do, actually, because some of this is awkward, you know, and I've used cutting wheels, hacksaws, all sorts of things. I think I'm going to do it with the plasma cutter. I think I can get it everything, and then of course it's got to be ground and sanded down. But the chrome moly tubing is arriving today in that 1.5 inch for the top, 1 inch for the rest of the frame, although it's actually 7/8, but I'm going to make just that back top loop out of inch, I think. I've got some 3/4 coming as well. I don't know, I'll think about that. Also for strengthening plates for here and elsewhere, I'll put some extra ones on actually, seeing as it's a scrambler. I've got some 1/8 inch chrome moly plate ordered as well, so that's all coming today. So we're ready to go. So let me put the heating on and we'll move to the other side of the workshop and set up in the frame jig. There's the frame mounted in the jig, so that's all nice and strong. It's mounted across there. For those of you who haven't seen this jig, it mounts in the 3 engine mounting points. The idea is that when I cut the top out, this can't open out and flop. It's built for putting the BSA engine in, so that holds it exactly so the engine will go in no matter what else happens. You can see here actually, I think, there's where the rear suspension units bolt now. There's where they bolt when I've done the frame. This tube comes inwards to there and it's all cut off and loaded and everything like that. So I'm going to swing it round so that I'm not cutting towards the camera, and we'll see how this works. Cleaned off some paint to get us a good I'll put my coloured safety glasses on. Everything is switched on. So what I'm going to do is just cut it out roughly and then I'll cut it more carefully later on and then grind off the last bits. So let's see what happens. Well, this seems to be going pretty well. Now then, I turned you off because of course the compressor came on. So I got the main portion out. What I'll do now is carefully cut round there and cut round here so that I don't get into the frame itself, and give myself the least amount of grinding to take off. So I'll do that, and then we'll come back when we're ready to do this top piece, the new piece. Right, so we've got the first piece cut out. I actually cut this back a little bit further so it was easy to get the grinder in here. All that cleaned up, and as I say, this is held nice and rigidly. So the next thing for me to do is to weld in a cross piece there, across there, and then that will be what this comes down to, the 1.5 inch piece of tube, and then we'll get all that braced in and we can look at the back end. So let me cut a piece of tube for this and get it welded in. That's the new piece welded in there. So now we can cut a piece of 1.5 inch tube to do the top of the frame, but we'll do that in the morning. Right, it's the next morning, and you might hear the heating in the background because it is 15 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about, I don't know, minus 10 centigrade. It's Thursday. Would you believe it's Saturday? It's going to be 56 degrees. Anyway, I've laid the frame over a little bit just so you can get a better look at this. We've got all this cleaned off, we've got our piece put in here. So what we're going to do now is, with a piece of 1.5 inch diameter, we're going to go from there to there, about like that. Oh, stay on there. So as you can see, that's just a little bit more than 90 degrees. So we're going to have to, what's the word, cope the ends. Now I've got to admit, this end is fiddly because, see, it's 1.5 inch tube, so that's fine. That's actually smaller than this, so that's nice. But this is 1 inch. So if I put it on sort of cut centrally, I'm sticking up the top. So it's got to be down like that. So this one, we've not only got this little curve here, but it's going to have to be sort of cut in like that. So what I generally do is I do this end, because I can just about move it over a little bit to miss here. Make a piece of tube long enough to go right past here. Then when that end's done, I'll measure this. I start to cut it a little bit at a time and slowly drop this in. I sort of pivot it on there and drop that in and drop it in and drop it in and drop it in until it fits. Also, although I can get a pretty good joint here, I'll be honest with you, it's never a brilliant one here. But because of the two tubes that are going to go there, this is all going to be gusseted. So I'm not overly worried. Alright, I'm going to show you something else as well. Right, now you may remember that originally the plan was to cut this piece out as well. And when I made these, I was going to come and do a completely new piece. Well, when I was out in the shed getting the jig, I found a couple of things. I found this, which is the saddle of a Can-Am. It's got an aluminium base, and funnily enough, along the edges it's got a sort of piece of nylon or something fastened to it so that you can staple a new cover to it. So I found that. I also found this. Now, as I say, I had a complete KDX and I was going to restore it, and one of the first things I spotted was a nice new cover. So I got one of those and put it on the saddle. This saddle's got nylon base, it's got nice bolt-on brackets, so we can make this mount, and because of the width of it, I'm going to leave that. Also, the judicious use of some acetone and vinyl cleaner, and I got rid of KDX, so I can make this just black. So we can fit that on there. As I say, I can redo these brackets, and that will drop just nicely onto there. So I don't think I need to do anything with this, and of course the nice thing with this is it's got its brackets on the end. So I'm just going to cut it off there to get rid of this front loop, this great big front loop, and then we'll sleeve it and we'll go from there. I think I'm going to use this one just follow that little curve. We'll just come in a bit like that. I'll put a little curve in it here. Right, so let's get on and make this top tube. This is the first stage. I've put a straight rod on to show me where the top of the tube is going to go. It just goes onto there. And then I've actually made a little template. That's going to give me, hang on, my arm's in the way, isn't it? That's going to give me some idea of how to cut this end of the tube. And as I say, what I'll do is I'll cut it because I can sort of pivot it round like that a bit as I fit it at the top, so I can keep the tube going there. Now I'll measure from the top of here to there, but remember if you measure from here to here, don't cut the tube there, because at this end, see, when the tube is like that, it's actually got, you're only measuring to there, so you've got to take into account the fact that the cope is going to bring the tube round, so the tube's going to be longer. But we're going to cut it about to here, as I say, and slowly fit it in. And on this one, this distance is going to be longer than that, because as you can see, this end slopes away and that end slopes away. That's more than 90 degrees, that's more than 90. So the bottom line is the longer of the two. So again, if you cut it from there, if you measured from there to there and cut it, it would be down here somewhere, no good. And same here, it would be here. You'd have a big gap at the bottom on both sides. So let me cut a length tube and start to form that into this end of it, and then we'll see about getting it to fit both ends. It's a slow process. Now that we've got this end cut, and that is going to be pretty close onto there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a couple of measurements so we can start fitting that into there. Now the other thing is, you've got not much, but a tiny little bit of play that when you get this in tight, you'll be able to bang it in, and that'll move very slightly to let that in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from here to that mark, and from the bottom of here, I'll mark this on here, to that mark. They're 1.5 inches apart, as you can see, right? And then I can mark the top of this and the bottom of this, and then don't forget I have to put the curve in for the cope, and then we'll just start to fit it. Now here's the first cut. So it's in there, and as I say, we can just gradually now, see, this is where, that should be where the bottom is. Just gradually take it out till this comes up and fits in, and then we'll weld it in. So let me just start taking, there's the original marks I made. I think it's going to be pretty close to them from the measurements, the top and bottom measurements. So what I've done is I've cut it out, given a little bit of extra metal there, so I can slowly work my way back. Because if I'd have cut it to that and it'd been wrong, I'd have been really annoyed. So you just take out less than you think you're going to need, and then gradually work your way back. That's why I say it takes its time. And there, as I mentioned, you can push it in a little bit. It'll give slightly, because we don't want to change the head angle, but we can just make sure it's okay. Alright, so let me beaver away with the file and the grinder and gradually work that up to there. Right, I've finished all my filing in bits and pieces, and I've just realised that I've been misleading you slightly. I was saying that you put the tube in and dog it in from the top, but you don't, of course, because the bottom's the bigger one. So here it is, all done up. I've marked it for the centre. So you put it in at the bottom, and of course you have lots of space. So forgive me for that. And then this comes up. Look. And there we are on our marks. Nice cope joints both ends. So let me clean this off, and then I'll tack it up and we'll bronze that in. I can't make my mind up whether to do a plate type of reinforcing there, or there are two holes here. They're for when this is part of the oil tank. And what I normally do on the trials bikes is I bring the wires from the electronic ignition up through there. But I won't be able to do that this time because this tube will have a couple of pieces through it for the bottom engine mounting. So I was thinking I might get a piece of inch, or I could even use another piece of 1.5 inches, and just go from there to there. Anyway, we'll see. Let me get this bronzed in first. Before I get started, I thought I'd show you this nifty little gadget I bought. See it here? It pivots on these 2 pins and there's a magnet in each end, and actually it comes with a little bracket as well with magnets on it. So here it's holding that in nicely, or what you can do with it, you see, is how much can you see there? You could set it like that and then use that to mount a bracket. See these little magnets there? If you're welding a bracket on, that holds that. So just thought I'd show you that handy little gadget. I got it from what to call the fella, welding Geordie. Yeah, weldingtipsandtricks.com. I got them from his website. They're really handy, not that expensive. Okay, let me get stuck in. So there is that end and that end bronzed in. So the only thing to do now is we're going to cut this. I'm going to cut it where I can get a straight piece. So I'm going to cut it about there, and then we'll see about making up the bits that go there. Now I've cut out where the tube went onto there, and as you'll see, it actually, the way it was, it sloped down, and then here it curved back up to meet that piece. So that was, it actually was bent there. So that brings it up so it's pointing over here at that. So we're going to have to do that. Now then, we've had, I think, a little bit of good fortune. We just move round and get this here. I've decided to use the KDX saddle. Let me pull you back a little bit, I think. In fact, let me pull you back a bit more. There we go. Now the KDX saddle. Let me get the tank as well. Hold on 1 second. Right. Now if this tank gets, there's a rubber at the back that bolsters it up a little bit. So, there we put the tank on, like thus, so it's nice at the front. This saddle fits on there beautifully. It just drops down the sides like that. And as you can see, it matches up nicely. Well, you can't quite see, can you? There you go. It matches up there. It's actually going to be up a little bit. So when I was fiddling around, I was playing with my new pipe bender, and I bent up a piece of 3/4 inch pipe and turn it up that way. Can you see that? Yes. You can see where the frame tubes normally sit. Look, if I've done a 360-degree bend. So if I do a little bit less bend so that it comes back, that would make the perfect top rails. Now if I'd known that beforehand, I actually wouldn't have put this crosspiece in, because I could have put that right into there. But what we're going to do is we're going to just notch that in there slightly. I could fit it on at the sides, but the whole point of this design, or the way I make the modifications, is the upward force, which isn't much of course from the suspension units, because the suspension units are supposed to take the upward force. We're triangulated, so that force goes into there, and then that goes up to the headstock and everything's good. So I don't want the forces pushing at the side, I want the forces pushing right onto that, because then they go straight into there. So what I'm going to do is just mark into this a little bit so that that just drops into there. So we'll bend a piece like this, only not quite as severe, so it comes out a little bit. And then what I'm going to have to do is bend it up slightly there to reach here and straighten it also. So there's a couple of tricky little bits down here, but only a few degrees. The big thing is that 360 just fits in there perfectly. So let me measure this. I've got to work out the diameter of that and then the lengths of these and add it together so I know how long a piece to cut. Then we'll bend that in with extra here. You can just lay it on, and we'll get that sorted. And what I think I'll do, because I want to put a sleeve in here to sleeve this. Now obviously if that's going to go there, it's going to be up against, whoa, that shocked you, didn't it? It's got to be up against there. So I think when I've cut this, or bent it I should say, I'm going to cut it in two here, and then that way, if you imagine that part's not there, I can put this onto the sleeve and then just turn it down into there. Then the two ends will meet, they'll get welded up, and they're still pressing into that. So let me measure this, cut it, and then we'll see about doing the bend. We can both watch me doing this, and then that way we'll learn together. So I've cut myself a length of tube, which should be long enough to have a straight bit, curved bit, and a straight bit. And I've marked the end of the first straight bit because that's where I want the curve to start. Although actually from my reading it doesn't start exactly there. They suggest making templates and things so you can mark it. But anyway, we've got the die in for the appropriate size, and behind it is the shoe. So we put this in here, like so. Lift the shoe up. These have got little pins in, so I suppose I could knock the pin through to adjust it. Put that in like that. Then this mark that you saw, I'm going to put right to the start of the die. Right there. And then if we have to take it out and do it again, I'll know where to put it. Tighten this up, and that grips this end in the shoe. Tighten it a little. Not much more, but just a bit more than finger tight, because we obviously don't want to collapse the pipe. The tube, sorry, seeing as there is a difference. Right, so that holds that. Okay, now, if we were making a particular size, there's a little pointer that goes on there, and here's our degree wheel. We'd have the pointer, we'd move that until the pointer was on 0, and then as we bend it, we can see what's what. So that's in there. We put this thing here and we start to bend. And we go, move it to the next notch, and bend a bit more. And we just keep doing that. And you can feel it spring back actually, which it mentions. But you just keep going like that. And this is 3/4 inch 16th wall. And I haven't even got the extension out, really. This ratchet thing does work really well. So keep doing that. When you got the last notch done, you take this out of here, we swing that round, and there are holes in the dies, so you put it in the next hole and you can start again. In your notches, and you just go on like that. notch after notch, moving this around the die. So I won't bore you with that. Let me finish bending it and then we'll go back to the bike. So there it is, all in. Now as I say, I cut it in the centre. I made it in one piece, but cut it in the centre because what I was able to do then was I put it onto its little sleeves. I cut a little scoop into that, and then I was able to put it in, and it all fits in nicely, see, because I have just enough spring to get it to go in. So when this is all nicely put right and matching up, I've had a level on it and it's level with the frame. So as I say, this frame tube bending is not that easy. It's even worse than trying to bend sheet. And well, my first effort, when I thought I'd measured it right, as you can see, is miles out. It's like 3 inches on each side. Then I discovered, I gave myself, I thought, plenty of tube, that you've got to sort of lead into the bend. It tells you in the instructions how to work it out and make templates and things, but of course I had to have a go straight away. So what ended up was, as I'd hoped, this end was long. I wanted them, but this side I was actually 1/4 of an inch short. So instead of it fitting in perfectly, it was long that side, short this side. So I've had to make like a little spindle piece to go in there because I didn't want to redo the whole thing, because there was this 360 bend. Then I had to put a bend in, it's just there, to bring them in, and then here there's another bend so that as that slopes down it comes up to match up with this. So anyway, it's all done. So now I'll tack it and then make sure it's still all nice and level, and then I'll bronze it all up. Then we'll take the frame out with a jig and I'll start to put in all of the little gussets that I'm going to do. Now I've started on the various gussets. This one I've made to go all the way around because of the joints. So nothing special here, just made a cardboard template. This time, instead of making it out of stiff cardboard, I made it out of sort of cardstock. I don't like paper templates, they're too flimsy, but the cardstock you buy is just nicely stiff enough to hold its shape, but you can bend it easily. So that was cut out. That was just 1/16 because it's wrapped round, what have you. That was quite strong enough. But for the front one, we're going to use a thicker gauge. So let me swing you around. So here we're going to fit one right into here. So again, cardboard template. Then because this was thicker gauge and there's slight curves in it, what I did was I made up another piece 1/4 of an inch smaller, just out of aluminium, so that would act as a guide for the plasma cutter. And then with that I cut out this, drill the hole, because what we're going to do on the back is put a captive nut, and I'm just working on this one now, putting the curve in. So that's going to go which way? Like that, in there. And then the side panel we make can bolt on there with the captive nut behind. So let me finish fettling these and then we'll get them bronzed in. And there's the gusset in for this one. I'm not going to touch it because it's still hot. So that's bronzed in there and there. And there's our captive nut. So when we make a plate, a side panel, side cover, whatever, it'll curve around like that and it can bolt there. And then what we'll do is, hold on a second, hold on to your seats. We'll put a similar little piece in there, and for down here we'll put a piece, just a small piece on the back of that, and then when it's bolted up it'll be, because it'll be 1/16 the same as this, it'll be level with that. And hang on, hold on. Whoop, whoop, whoop. There you go. So it'll bolt there, we'll have a little piece in here, and we'll have a piece on the back of this, so that when it bolts to that it'll go up the tube round. It'll all fit in nicely. It's going to look absolutely lovely. I'm chuffed to death with that TIG bronzing. There you go, Charlie, get yourself a TIG bronzing set up. Alright, lunchtime. So here we are, back with the engine. I've still got a couple of brackets to put on, but I've put enough of the gusset plates and everything and the strengtheners in so that I can cut the bottom out without the frame doing anything untoward. So I've just been looking at a number of things. We know the engine physically fits in, but exactly how I was leaving until now. Right, we know we're going to cut this front part out and we're going to use engine plates there. Funnily enough, I've lined those holes up, and this mounting hole virtually hits the underneath mounting, and it lines up with the back one. We could almost fit this in. It's strange. But anyway, I got the footrests out that go on a B50. You can see there are slots there. Well, you're a little way off. And there's a piece that fits in so that it can't turn. So that goes in there like that with the long through balls. Well, obviously the B50 engine is slimmer than this one, so I would have to do something about those. So originally I was going to cut off these and cut it about there so I can get a triangle, because as I say, this engine mounting, funnily enough, is almost in line with that. So if I want to put a triangle here, I'm basically going to cut it off just underneath the bottom of the plate and cut these off. Now what I might do even is put the slightest bit of a bend in that just to take it out. Hopefully I won't have to, because I don't want to move the engine forward at all. We don't want more weight on the forks. So at the back here, I know this part of the frame isn't wide enough to take the engine, but the sump only goes to about here. So I was thinking of cutting it off here and seeing if I could drop it in and use these mounts. But now that's almost moot. So I think what I'm going to do is cut it back here, give myself plenty of room for this engine to drop in. And I have 2 or 3 options after that. I could go just like the Enfield frame without any bottom, because I've got 2 big mountings at the back, as I mentioned. We're going to have a mounting at the front, we're going to have mountains at the head. This is going to be such a completely wonderfully stressed structure that I don't think it needs these. We might put a bash plate on, we might put detachable tubes on, there's all sorts of things. But in the first instance, I think I'm just going to cut all that out, and then we'll see how this fits in here. Now there's one thing I'm going to do on the engine as well, so let me show you that. Now here's the bottom of the engine. So as I say, the sump is a width that won't fit into the bottom tubes, but the sump only comes to here. We could drop that in and leave this alone. The thing that's spoiling that is where the starter motor goes. Normally the starter motor bolts on here, sticks through there, and comes into here, and it drives a little gear down there. And that's all. This gear is on its own little shaft, so I can take that gear out, and with that gear out I could actually cut this whole housing off, and then we'll just weld a little piece in for the hole where the gear pokes through. If we do that, make sure you're still in view, then this comes right back to here. So there's only half the engine that's that depth, that width, that has to sort of drop down. That's why I was hoping actually the footrest cross tube is about here. I was going to cut it just in front of the footrest cross tube, which would have been about there, and then the frame rails would have, the bottom ones of BSA would have been to here, and that could have dropped in nicely. I still might just cut it there to see if it'll fit in, and then if it won't, we'll cut them further back. But for the time being, let me cut this off so we can see how big the engine's going to be. There's that cut off and dressed up a bit, so I'd say there's a couple of holes, but that's fine, they'll get plated over, they're no problem. I was trying to get into this with various things, and I thought, oh, it's metal, so I actually cut this out, all this out, with a plasma cutter. So, get my money's worth out of that. Right, now let me go and use it to cut these brackets off the frame. Now I've mounted the engine on a little stand I made for when I was doing the XT500 frame, and got it so far on. Problem is this bottom engine mounting here. the bottom mounting on the engine itself is wider than the top one, and it just won't fit in. So I think what I'm going to have to do is cut back a little bit more, get this in on the top one, and then we can make something at the bottom, which is fine. This is what I was thinking all along, that this top engine mounting would be our starting point, because we did all our measurements from there. So if I put that in the mounting on the frame with a couple of spaces in so that it's held right, then we can do the front, and then we can actually lay it on its side or turn it upside down to work out the bottom. So let me cut a little bit more off, and then when we've tried that, that's going to be it for this week. Actually, you'll see that things don't go right. I always try to show you that, you know, you don't just cut this and it goes in. Well, some people do, but this was a process. It would have been nice if it had dropped in with that whole piece on, but that wasn't going to work. Go back a little bit, that isn't going to work, but we're still all right for our original plan, which is that top rear engine mount. So now I'll go and cut it. Right then, there it is, fits in. Don't worry about that touching there, because this box is coming off. This goes to the air box, and it sort of takes vapours and what have you out the cylinder head and recircs them into the intake and all that sort of stuff. So we don't have to worry about that, but we're nice and clear here. Not heavily clear, but clear enough. The rear engine mounting is at the same height as the frame mounting, but we can't get it back far enough to go in, so we're going to have to use plates at the back. That's alright. We can make up a temporary one off that just to hold that in place. That's no problem. This, I think what I'm going to do here, as I say, is put a little curve in it. I'll heat this up and just bend it round a little bit, give myself slightly more room. I'm not actually going to move the engine forward, but what I'm going to do is give myself a little bit more room, and then I can make the triangular plate. But didn't go in quite as easily as it looked as if it might, but it's in nonetheless. We've got space. This I've got a long bolt, and I've just got some 10mm rod to make the bottom engine mounting bolt out. But if I put this through there, you could see I can make a nice engine mounting just on the end of there for that. So I can do that both sides. A couple of spaces in, that'll be perfect. Then the way these tubes go, actually, I can continue these tubes down. Catch that, there's the very bottom engine mounting. I could go down, catch that, come round and go to the front. So we'll make up some bottom tubes, I think. But I'm going to check, because this is so close at the top. It's like the B50. The B50 engine only just fits in the frame. The way they do it so you can get the engine in and out is the front engine mounting. The rear engine mountings are plates, so you can take them off. But the front one, which is fastened to the frame, and the bottom one, which sticks down between the rails, the actual casting on the engine, front and bottom, is narrower than the mounting it goes into, and there's a spacer. And the idea is you pull the bolts out, you take the two spacers out, and that gives you a little bit of wobble room. And you can just tilt it over and it comes out. We're going to be the same here. We're going to be really pushed to get this engine in and out. It goes in, but so as I say, what I might do is even make detachable, or at least one side detachable, so that you can just take the engine out. Because once that's moved out slightly for the plate, we've got a gap here. In fact, there's loads of space at the back. This engine would just come out this way without any problem. So we'll look further into that. Right, well, humping that about has tired me out. So I'm going to call it a day. I'm going to call it a week. So until next time, enjoy yourselves.